Richard Branson once said, if you place the emphasis on getting the little things right and address the everyday problems that come up, you can encourage a culture of attention to detail. When making experiences, attention to detail matters. This is the Producer's Lounge Podcast, the best podcast online for tips and tricks on producing great film, television, and web content. Welcome back for Season 3, Episode 1, hosted and produced by greaterandgrander.com. On this week's episode, we're chatting with Jordan Kerner, who has produced major studio blockbuster films, including The Smurfs, the Mighty Ducks franchise, Charlotte's Web, and more. We discuss putting his job on the line when discovering Bruce Willis for the show Moonlighting, raising money independently for his Oscar-nominated film Fried Green Tomatoes, and how he worked with the writers on the Mighty Ducks films to innovate the four-quadrant family movie. And we did all this at his beautiful home in Los Angeles. I want to thank Jordan for opening up his home to recording. We also touch on his upcoming projects, including a real story inspired by the German director Kurt Gerren and his time as the Dean of the School of Filmmaking at the prestigious University of North Carolina School of the Arts in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Also, on a personal note, as someone who has been around Hollywood a while, you get told a lot that the higher you go, the nicer you find people. And Jordan proves that rule. He was incredibly gracious and kind. We spent 90 minutes talking in his home about his projects and amazing life lived, including some project information that I can't share on a public podcast, but it was truly a delight. Here now is my conversation with producer Jordan Kerner. Thank you so much for
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for coming all the way out. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I have a meeting a little later here, so.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. You've done everything at every level.
It's interesting because my orientation, I was at ABC before,
right,
and we were doing, Aaron Spelling had sort of controlled the network, and ABC, the Aaron Broadcasting Company, is what they called it. But, and I was brought in at that point to try to change and make formats different, television for younger people, more complex stories, ongoing character arcs, things like that. When we were, all the networks were doing these procedurals, it was a cop show, each one could broadcast wherever you put it. Nothing was different until Brandon at NBC did Hill Street Blues.
Brandon Tartikoff?
Tartikoff.
Yeah.
And that sort of created all the character arcs. We had a show where we broke the fourth wall. We played with everybody. We had my bartender, not just mine, but all the guys from ABC and women who were executives. We would go to the Cafe Central, and it was a young guy who was a theater actor from time to time. We would see him, and he would ask us to come to see him in a play. There, whenever he was the understudy, would have his shop. So actually one night we did that, and we went to see him in a play that was written by another friend of mine called Danny and the Deep Blue Sea, and John Patrick Shanley. And the young actor's name was Bruce Willis. And we all loved him. And so we had this show that was a Sybil Shepherd commitment. It was her 13 episode on the air commitment. And we had to find the guy to play opposite her. It was a romantic comedy about two detectives who never solved a crime. And we saw so many people for that role, but that role had to be credible as a detective, whip smart and funny, and able to, Sybil was a big presence, be able to be strong opposite her in that. We didn't ever find the right person. In fact, Lou Ehrlich, who's Jamie Ehrlich, the head of Apple Plus,
yes,
it's his father, was my boss. He was the head of ABC, president of ABC Entertainment. He wanted to use the Marlboro Man. Lovely guy, couldn't act. The actor who played the Marlboro Man in the commercials. Lou just sort of didn't, he was on the sales side. He was never on the creative side of all of this.
Right.
So we said, no, we have someone we think you're going to really like. And we brought in Bruce, like in an office, we shot videotape. and with his read, and we showed it to Lou, and Lou made all these comments about Bruce. Basically, he said, he's not a leading man. Okay, he's not the guy. And then I thought, okay, I said, reserve your thought. We're going to come back in 2 days. Glenn Caron, who was the creator and writer, Glenn and I had a long chat about putting him on film as opposed to doing a quick videotape. So we got a stage at 20th Century Fox. We lit it. You know, we got Bruce in wardrobe and makeup and hair rather than just sitting at across the table. And we lit him carefully. He has a receding hairline, all of that. So we lit him carefully with all of that. And then everybody else at ABC loved him. And Lou was like, it's on your head. Don't love him. Don't know about this guy. And I said, I'll take the mail. And if at the end you want to fire me, you can fire me. Okay. But I believe in this guy. And I believe in giving people breaks like this, and the rest was history. After the first season, he was doing Die Hard, and, went on for 4 seasons, I think. And it's now on Hulu. So, yeah, we were very excited about that. So,
been an executive producer, dean, political activist.
Yeah, all those things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Variety, actually, they did one of those $1 billion producer things on me in probably 2013 or 14, something like that. And they had a section on politics. They had a section on university, and then they had producing and being an executive, because I was an executive at ABC for many years as head of dramatic programming, and I was an executive first as an assistant and then as a director of development at Universal Television.
Before we get into that, where'd you grow up?
I grew up here. Born in the Scientology Center, which then was Cedars of Lebanon Hospital. It's the big lavender building in the back. If you're on Sunset looking in,
yes,
it's like 13 story or 14 stories in the back right of it. I always like to put it that way because we all chuckle when we think about that. But
nice. And you were also born in the trunk because your mother was a performer of stage and screen.
She was in a number of films with a couple of lines. Actually, she became much more of an actress, probably starting with the Mighty Ducks, I think, for us. She was in that. She was in George of the Jungle. She was in Inspector Gadget. She was in a bunch of the movies over the years. Just loved having a line or 2 or 5. Yeah. It was a real joy to be able to do that.
And then at a certain point, you went up north. It was UC Berkeley, correct?
I went to graduate school at UC Berkeley, undergraduate school at Stanford. And so, yes, I spent 8 years in the Bay Area. Loved every second of it. Had the industry been up there, I would have stayed. As much as I love Los Angeles, but I really love the Bay Area. Have a lot of friends still, go up there a lot. Yeah.
And you went to school, of course, not to study film, but to study law.
Actually, I went to school pre-med.
Oh, my
I went to school pre-med for 2 years.
Yeah.
Stopped it because I wasn't interested, but more than anything else, I had a course in my end of my sophomore year, spring quarter, for a guy named Jules Dundies. And if you ever saw a film called Good Night and Good Luck.
Yes, with David Strathairn.
Yes, with David, and with George Clooney played Fred Friendly, and he directed. In that, Robert Downey Jr. played a composite character of my professor, Jules Dundies, who was right under Paley. He was in news first and then in entertainment. And it made a huge impression on me. If you remember, that movie was about McCarthy and the Radulovich trial, the Polish Catholic, Air Force colonel, I think he was, who was being prosecuted or called into question because his sister once went to a Socialist Worker Party meeting and his father was photographed reading some liberal paper. It was crazy. But that course politically changed my mind. And that professor made me see that I could have a life where the messages that we would put in the DNA of the movie, not in the subject matter of the movie or in dialogue, but underneath it, the things that you would feel. example, Mighty Ducks, those, basically an all-white male sport, okay, at that point in hockey. We had girls and boys, all races and both sexes, and we never said it. We never said, look how cool we are. We're like the Benetton ad, or, we never said anything like that. But it was very clear to the audience underneath it that this was a special group, that they were funny, they were kind, they had great values, and they were the most diverse of everyone going. So it's things like that. Or George tried to preserve the jungle, right? Because the jungle carried wonder, and it carried medicines, and it carried, animal life that deserved to live their lives. It had all these things. So we always put those things underneath our movies over the years. I feel that our movies, in a curious way, and I'm very proud of this fact, hold up. So when you see them years later, they don't age poorly. They aged well, and people see them and they're still relevant. Less Than Zero, was more direct message.
Less Than Zero, your first film?
Was first film.
Yeah.
Was more of a direct message, because in the Bret Easton Ellis book that came out in 85, I think it was, the lead character, Clay, in the opening scenes of the book, comes back from college and sleeps with his best friend. They have a sexual relationship, a buddy, and then goes and sleeps with his girlfriend. Well, the only thing that happened in the intervening year between 1985 and 1986 was AIDS. And nobody knew what it was, right? In fact, they were horrible names given to it, like gay cancer.
They originally called it GIDS, if I recall, because gay and, deficiencies.
Yes, all of that. Yeah. So, but nobody knew, but everybody realized that you couldn't have males sleeping with men and sleeping with women, because it put women at too great a risk in that. And then, of course, contraception was so important, and all those things. So we were charged by 20th Century Fox Scott Rudin was there at the time, a gay man, was there at the time, and saying, we don't want to do anything that's going to, make everybody feel horrible who's in the gay community. That's not what this is about. But what it needs to be about is these relationships and love, and ultimately it was about drugs, a lot of it. And the way we approached that was love the young character who takes the most drugs. He's so fascinating. He's so funny. He's so lovable and interesting. Follow him and see what happens. And of course, at the end of the movie, he dies. And that was Robert Downey Jr. And that character, who was Bobby to me. I'm just trying to, it's behind other things. There's a picture of us there. We're all much younger. And there's Obama and me. If you see right behind that, you see Andrew McCarthy, Jamie Gertz, me and Bobby. In that, of course, now he's Robert, but he was so amazing, such a brilliant young actor. Yeah. It wore his heart on his sleeve and had great skills. And anyway, it was just such a pleasure to work with.
So why did you choose to make that your first film?
So it was literally, we had an overall deal at Disney in television, because I had come from television, and Jon Avnet was a feature producer who was my partner. And so we didn't expect a movie to come to us that quickly. But it literally, Scott Rudin called us, John and I went in to meet with him, and he said, we have this other team doing this movie, but they don't want to change it. We can't distribute the movie that we would make with them. We need to make changes because of the medical, the political scene that's around the world right now. Nobody knows, right? So we need to protect gay people. We need to protect the actors. We need to protect the audience. We need to do all of that. And emphasize the drug part of the movie. You don't have to emphasize the bisexuality of the movie or the fluid sexuality of the movie.
Right.
Not terms necessarily used then, but now people would understand that. So we came in, and as I said, we made it be much more about drugs and cocaine in Los Angeles in the 80s, all of which was true. So, and all of which was in the book.
Yeah.
So we followed that, and they came to us and offered us a go picture. We had to have a new script written, but they were going to greenlight it if it was even close. A guy named Harley Payton was the writer, did a fabulous job, and I think we were greenlit in about 4 months or something. I think we had a draft and a half or 2 drafts, and that was it. We went, and we were rewriting every day. It was a funny time at 20th Century Fox. 3 executives were giving us notes every single day at the set, because this was before the internet. So we would get pages written by, I won't mention the names, but 3 very high executives at Fox saying, don't do this, and here's the dialogue. And and I was thinking, it's my first movie. What the heck is going on? Is this the way it is, John? You know? And he said, no, this isn't the way it is. And he was like my brother, my big brother, and so helpful to me in making the transition between being a developer and a buyer to being a producer and a seller. So, in that. So that's why Less Than Zero. And we thought it was interesting. We thought it had that underlying DNA.
Right.
And that it was a movie that we could be proud of. And it was so interesting because the movie did okay. It didn't do great. It did okay. But the soundtrack was platinum. We had the Bangles singing Hazy Shade of Winter. We had LL Cool J, his first song, first big hit of Come Back to Cali. And all these great bands, were in it. And it was a big CD at that point. So.
Okay. You mentioned something very interesting, which was the transition of going from a developer and a buyer to a seller and a producer. What was the biggest lesson that you learned in that kind of transition process?
We were in the business. We wanted to be doing a series, and we wanted to be doing movies.
Yeah.
But Jon had, just before that, I had worked with our movie department at ABC to give Jon a commitment, okay? Because to make a long story short, my last big thing, other than moonlighting, was something called Call to Glory. And it was Craig T. Nelson, Elizabeth Shue, a whole bunch of great people in that. And it was my senior thesis in college, which was it was a story about a family at the vortex of social change. So the daughter, played by Elizabeth, was 16. And and the show moved 3 years in history for every year it was on the air. So it was sequential, and it jumped a little here and there.
Right.
So that by the end of the first season, we began in 1962 with the Gary Powers being shot down, coming from that base. It was an Air Force base in Florida. And so we made this show. It was, again, my senior thesis, because I was in political science and film after I gave up pre-med. And so for me, it was a great reward, and the network loved the series. It was just something. It was nominated for an Emmy. Everybody thought this was going to be the big new thing. Put it on right after the '84 Olympics. In that, and so to reward Jon and Steve, who came to me and pitched a similar show based on The Great Santini, if you remember that basketball movie, years and years and years ago. I wanted to reward, Jon then became my partner, I wanted to reward him for that. And so we gave him a film, a TV movie to produce. It was with Farrah Fawcett and, I'm forgetting her name, it'll come to me. It was called Between Two Women. It got such remarkable reviews that Jon was called the Bergman of television. And so it was really fantastic. And then, that was before we were partners. And then the other networks knew that I had done work in drama and TV movies. And Jon had done this TV movie. I think one other, and then some TV movies that we were developing got greenlit very quickly. So we started in that business, and it's that story really quickly that I'm going to answer the question, which is how did I make the transition?
Totally fine. Take your time.
How did I make that transition? And this was our very first one.
Yeah.
Danny Thomas, Sid Caesar,
Milton Berle.
Milton Berle,
Yeah.
and Maury Amsterdam, right? It was that group. Hilarious. And I love them. We had a great time. Jon, what he did every summer, at the end of the summer, end of August, early September, he and his wife and his children would go to the south of France and hang out at the ocean. And so he said, I'm going to leave you with a sheet of things that you need to get done on the movie, right? And these are all the steps that we have to go through. So he was so kind and terrific with that. And one day, Milton Berle's walking his dog. Nothing good is going to come of this. It was a Great Dane. So now you're getting the picture.
Yeah.
And he lived in the hills of Beverly Hills. So he was walking down a steep hill. His dog took off after a cat, dragged Milton, fell down.
Oh my God.
Fell down and broke either his arm. I'm forgetting. He broke something major.
Yeah.
I don't think it was his leg, but it might have been. But I think it was his arm. Well, we couldn't shoot. You had to wait for 6 weeks or whatever for him to get out of the cast. And I called up Jon and said, here's what happened. And he said, okay, well, did you look at the sheet? And I said, yeah, I looked at the sheet. I didn't see anything about actors falling or anything like that. He said, no. Did you get the insurance on the actors? And I said, I looked at the sheet and I said, there's nothing about insurance here, right? And as a network executive, that wasn't something I dealt with. Producers dealt with that or studios dealt with that.
Right.
Wasn't something I thought about. So Jon said, okay, I'm coming home. And he got on the flight. We came back and realized we didn't have insurance. So the claim was going to be something like $300,000 of delay costs. And in those days, the producers of TV movies, we were the bank. We were the bank and we were the producers. So this was like mortgage the house time. You know, it was scary. And the head of TV movies, Steve, and I'm not remembering Steve's last name right now, but Steve Mills. There it is, Steve Mills. The most wonderful man. I worked at CBS in business affairs before I went to ABC.
Right.
And loved Steve. And Jon said, you need to go to Steve and tell him exactly what happened and see if he'll help, right? So, because we should share the costs in this. And I went to Steve, hat in hand, and said, I'm really sorry. And said, you know, Jon was away and this is Steve, this is my first movie with you guys. I'm so appreciative of it. Here's what happened, you know. He did the beautiful thing, two things, of sort of drawing it out and letting me be a little nervous about what was going to happen in the room. By the end, he finally said, look, well, we love this movie. You were a big part of our family. We love you. We'll take care of it. And I just expected maybe he would contribute 25% or 50%. But he was such a good person, you know. And with that happening and that kindness that was shown in that, I realized with every movie from then on how every detail is so important. And that transition was then me not just referring to a list, but going beyond that list and then ultimately making sure that everything was always shipshape and watertight and everything was great. So that was a huge lesson for me in that transition.
And is it? Oh.
I was 35, but thank goodness.
Yeah. And you have a ton of, I'm going to try and get some pictures for the cover photo, but you have amazing posters here. I remember when Man Loves a Woman, they showed it to us in school, and George of the Jungle, Mighty Ducks. By the way, I loved Mighty Ducks growing up.
Thank you.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
I'm wondering which.
And by the way, tomorrow night I'm hosting all of them here to watch the first NHL final game.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's good. That's great.
Yeah. Each one is a baby,
Yeah.
right? And you watch it grow and you love it. And Avnet would say to me, "Oh, you become a duck now," or "Oh, you become a musketeer," or you're living in the jungle now, because I would become so obsessed with each movie.
Yeah.
And as a producer, unlike a lot of producers, I always developed the movies. I, with the studio, hired a director after we were greenlit. So it wasn't that I had the director brought me in or something else. We always brought the director in, and we became partners. And I would say, we're going to sit together all day, every day. You're going to get whatever it is you want to get, and if I think that's what is going to make the film be the film that we sold the studio or the network, that then I'm going to be really happy with it. And if I feel that we maybe miss some things, I'm going to wait till you get exactly what you want. And then I'm going to ask you to give me 3 takes. Give me 3 takes and try this idea. I've done that a lot with directors. And I would say to them, I'll never ask you to use what I've asked for over yours. It'll always be a joint decision. But it's an option when we have very few options in the editing room, because you always have few options, because you got to get it done in time, you got to get it done on budget, you got to, there are all those things. You can't get everything that you want. But in the scenes where we had questions, we had options.
Yeah.
So and I always have worked multiple times with directors, with cinematographers, composers, whatever, over the years, because you develop a relationship and you trust people. Luis Mandoki, with A Man Loves a Woman, we're working on another movie right now together.
Well, great.
And we're working on what's immersive entertainment together with a company in Mexico. We're working on they just finished one on Frida, but we're doing one on the Taj Mahal that will be meant to open in India and New York and London when it opens. It's like, did you see?
I saw the Van Gogh.
You saw the Van Gogh.
Yeah.
So like that, but it's a much more sophisticated system now. And part of what we do in scripting it is we find in the artist's work a dinner table that shows all the food that was eaten at that time and all of that. So you can get the VIP entry, which gives you a full dinner with wine and whatever it is, but of that time and what they were eating in that painting.
And it's like you're dining inside the painting.
You're dining inside the painting. And you're hearing the voices of the artist and the characters talking about these things. Sometimes they're the voices and some things of the real people, but mostly they're actors' voices playing the part, because obviously the painters or the guy, the Hajj who created the Taj Mahal and his wife Mahal. They died, almost 1,000 years ago. But having said that, so working with people over and over. Steve Herrick, who directed the first Mighty Ducks, directed Musketeers. We worked on together. But in terms of how funny a film was,
yeah,
I think George of the Jungle was the funniest of all of them.
Okay.
I think Fried Green Tomatoes and When a Man Loves a Woman were the most emotional, as well as Charlotte's Web. And Clifford got close to that. And it's all a mixture of writer, director, actor, music, everything. So, by not mentioning others, I don't mean that they weren't as great a film, but most emotional would be those 3, and funniest, I think, would be George in that. Doing 3 Mighty Ducks movies, it was just 3 movies. I ended up writing all the college recommendations for the kids, because they went from being in middle school to being college kids, or going on to college at the end of the 3rd movie. And it was just a joy. I was so close to all their parents and to their siblings, and, It was a big family. And that, so there are many different aspects of what makes things favorites and, all of that in all these films. But I have to say that I've had a great experience on all of them. I feel very fortunate.
Which one was the biggest lesson for you to learn besides the Milton Berle one?
I have to look around. Fried Green Tomatoes had another big lesson in it. It was almost not made.
Whoa.
We went to every studio
Yeah.
with our script, beg them. Now, the bias in those days were for the big action boys, Cruise and, all those kinds of movies. This was 1991, and, it was not Maverick, that was the new one, but Top Gun. Yeah, it was movies like that, right? So, and the studio heads will remain nameless, but people would say to us, come on, guys, we want to work with you, but 2 women in the past and 2 women in the present, like, who's going to go see that movie? And we thought, well, half the population, come on. But no, nobody would do it. We went to one studio who we were very close to, and the head of it, who was a big name, wonderful guy. And I literally, on my 3rd attempt with him, got on my knees and said, I beg you that this is going to be a film that your studio is going to be proud of, and it's going to do really well. And it's going to cost you, $13, $14 million. And all your other movies are costing you 60 or 80, not like today, but 60 or 80 million dollars, so couldn't sell it. Ended up going to Norman Lear, and Norman put up the money. We put up the money for the first script, and Norman put up the money for the second script, and if there was deficit financing that had to happen, he was going to do that. But he wanted us, with his people, to go out and raise money. It was the only film that was completely independent that I've ever produced. So it was a big lesson in what indie filmmaking is like. And I'm a person, because I was spoiled being a buyer, right, where I sat in an office at ABC and people came to us, and that. And that whole story is a whole nother story, but it was such a privilege to have that. But we ended up going to dentists, a group of dentists who wanted to make a film in Dallas, right? And they put up some money. There were some Anglo women who were setting up a production company in Japan. And so they had some Japanese investors who wanted to make a film. They put money in. We knew we had to go internationally. We went to Rank Film in London, and Rank put up some money. And then John's old friend, who was his attorney, and also a friend of mine when I was at ABC, Tom Pollock, who was now the chairman of Universal at that point, said to us, we love this, and we're going to buy all the home video rights. So by that got us to 13 million, and our budget was 13.6, 13.4, somewhere in there. So we kept trying. Finally, Norman, everybody said, just go. Okay, try to save 400 grand. Okay, we had a bond company, we had all of that. We got down to the last 2 weeks of shooting, and we hit 13 million expenditures. So, and I had the week before that called with Tom Pollock, and said, okay, we're going to run out of money. Okay, we need probably $500,000 more, maybe 400,000, and we're going to keep all of our expenses down. Please, 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 please. He said, I'm going to let you guys sweat a little bit, but I'll bail you out. Right? It's a recurring theme in my life.
Definitely recurring.
Yeah. And it was so funny, not so funny then. And what we hadn't shot, we were authorized to shoot the scenes that were on the docket that we hadn't shot. What we had shot but hadn't finished, and we needed to get to, was the very opening of the movie. There's an opening where Kathy Bates is talking to her husband in a car, and she realizes she has to make a phone call, stops the car, gets out into a phone booth, makes the phone call, and as she's on the phone, you hear a train coming. And she looks, and the audience turns, and she looks, and in the window of a shut down little station, a conductor's cottage or whatever it was, next to the tracks, there was a big window, and you could see the train going by in the window, but no train was going by. So all of a sudden you're in magic realism, and you realize this isn't the movie you think it's going to be. And then we cut to not the train, because we don't see the train, but we cut to the point of view of the train. So the train car is moving down the tracks, and a goat runs across the tracks and moves to the side. And you come by, and the camera looks over this way, and you see Kathy in the phone booth on the phone looking at us, the camera, as we're coming by her. So we're not necessarily in the world as we know it, okay, in that. Which was letting the audience know they were going to see and feel and think of things that they don't expect. And it'd be an active viewer of the movie. And we hadn't shot the point of view, and we hadn't shot Kathy's point of view of the train moving in the window. So one of the scenes that we had decided to cut, but we hadn't told anybody, we just decided to cut, was a scene in a church in Juliet, Georgia. We had moved from Juliet, which was the town where the Whistle Stop Cafe was, and all the town that we had life in, that we had decided not, because we didn't have to have it. And it was Jessica Tandy going to church with Kathy Bates, with an all African-American choir and a minister in that church. And so Tom said to us, from Universal, said to us, if you shoot that scene, because I like that scene, and I think we need it, we'll give you the extra $500,000, because the bond company said we can't go and shoot that scene, okay? Because we didn't tell them that we weren't going to shoot it. We were just trying to save money. But Tom said, I don't want you to do that. So he called the bond company and said, I'm putting $500,000 in. Don't tell them what to shoot, because I couldn't sign checks anymore. There were all those things when the bond company takes over. So, without Tom Pollock, we would be in real trouble. And Tom gave us that money that we needed. Bond company moved away. So we went down to Juliet, and I said to Jon, I said, shoot the whole thing in the morning. And he said, it's a long scene, and there's music, and there's coverage, and I said, please shoot it in the morning. He directed it. It was his first film as a director.
Right.
He said, okay, tell me why. And I said, well, where are we? And he said, we're in a church. I said, no, where is this church? What city are we? Where are we? He said, we're in Juliet. What's the matter with you? And I said, yes, we're in Juliet. I said, what else did we want to do in Juliet that we didn't get to do? And he said, we didn't get to shoot the point of views, right? So we didn't have that opening. We just had Kathy on the phone, and we had nothing interesting or odd happening. So we took the second half of the day, and we shot those two things with that. And it literally saved the movie. Tom, by doing what he did, and Jon, by being agreeable in shooting the church in a half a day and then shooting the point of views in the other half of the day. Was a big, the lesson was gathering people to finance. The lesson was dealing with a bond company. It was, there were so many lessons, contained in all of that, that it taught me the most of all the other films.
Can I also tell you something that I find really funny? Is when I was at SC more years ago than I care to admit, Bruce Campbell came and talked to our class and talked about the experience of working with Sam Raimi to make Evil Dead.
Right.
And that was probably 10 or 15 years prior to the Fried Green Tomatoes. And the place that they got the most of their funding from was dentists.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's why you laughed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah.
The more things change, the more they stay the same.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, people who are aspirational, who don't have any of that in their lives. They want something else, which I got it, and I was sympathetic. And then, of course, the movie, I forget, but I think worldwide, the movie made nearly 200 million and cost 13 and a half. So, it was pretty incredible for all those people, all those investors. And Norman himself made about 40 million or something from that movie.
Right.
Yeah.
It seems like from the beginning of your career, you focused more on comedies and then moved into what some people would say are, family or children franchises.
Yes.
Was that intentional?
Okay. So, and I would just like to amplify what you said, which is you said we did a lot of comedies. We actually probably did more dramas during that time. Less Than Zero, When a Man Loves a Woman. Yes, Fried Green was a drama with a lot of comedy in it. Mighty Ducks was a drama with a lot of comedy in it. I didn't get to a real comedy until George.
Oh,
Okay, with that. And yes, Milton Berle, Danny Thomas, Sid Caesar was a comedy with drama in it. It was the other way. So in the TV movies, we did more romantic stuff and we did more comedy. And we tried to do more direct social impact, like Heat Wave, which won the Cable Ace Award. It's like a relic up there, because the Emmys didn't let cable in yet. Yeah, HBO or Showtime, they weren't able to get an Emmy. But about 2 or 3 years after that, they then allowed Emmys, but they didn't exchange them. We just get to keep our Cable Ace Awards. But yes, so we were not so much comedies, but one of my agents at CAA came to me and said, I have a script I want you to read.
Right.
And I read it. And I really liked its promise. I didn't like the script, but I liked the promise. And I said, has this been shopped around? He said, yes. And I said, to who? He said, to everybody. So I said, okay, so here's the deal. I understand why they didn't buy it. Okay, I have my own point of view on doing it. We got to change the whole thing, right? We got to do a lot of work on it. And I'm happy to work with the writer because it was his spec script. And that was Steve Brill, and he was like my little brother in that. And the whole story that went through all 3 movies was the relationship, because
the Mighty Ducks movie.
The Mighty Ducks movies was the relationship between Emilio and Josh Jackson. A man who was an alcoholic, who lost his father at an early age, whose coach, because Emilio was a hawk. That team was the sort of bad guy team, the snooty team, the athletic team, all those things. The coach was not a good man, and he was very tough on Emilio and didn't fill the shoes of being the father that Emilio needed. So as a man, he always wanted a son so that he could make the son's life much better than his own in that way. And Charlie, whose father left the family and whose mother is very protective of him, Charlie, Josh Jackson, needed a good father. And the script as that I got, the spec script, was basically Bad News Bears with an alcoholic Walter Matthau through the whole, most of the movie. And it was about alcoholism and it was about all those things. With Emilio, he just gets sent to be the coach for public service. And that was the end of his drinking in our movie. It was one scene, basically. But it really became about that deeper issue of fathers. And then Gordon Bombay, Emilio's character, falls in love with Charlie's mother. And she falls in love with him, but she's very careful about how they can see each other. She doesn't want her son put in the middle of it. It's a very complex story, very adult story.
Yeah.
And by the way, what I said is, in the first Mighty Ducks, is that I felt because I hadn't seen a lot of kids' movies since I was a kid. And they were kids' movies. They weren't adult 4-quadrant movies. And I said that, and I went to see a bunch, that I had seen, like, and I'd seen some and I went to see them again, like Old Yeller or things like that. And I realized that when they had what we know as family movies, they were written for children. They weren't written with double entendre. They weren't written with sophisticated plot lines or great character development. And I said, I just want to change this in the space. I was at Disney. Disney loved the idea because we were just creating the new live action department with David Hilberman and David Vogel. And I said, here's how I see family films. They're 4-quadrant. Think of them as appropriate for 5 to 105. Okay, they should work for that entire audience. And they will work on different levels. One level will be the kids will like physical humor. Another level, adults will like, subversive humor in that. And this is before DreamWorks and before Pixar and everybody else with that. Because we were 1992 and Pixar's first movie was 95. But they ended up, I believe, seeing what we were doing, but I'm not trying to take any credit for Pixar because they were geniuses, all of them. But I think they, more than anybody else, understood that it had to be a movie where the nostalgia was for the older elements of the audience. And the zany action was for the kids. So they realized they had to also make it a 4-quadrant film. But Mighty Ducks was the first one of those that came out, and it because it was so deep, this relationship between Emilio and Josh Jackson, was so strong as the core of the movie that everything that went on that had comedy or lighter emotion, you could see was there for one audience, and the deeper emotion was there for another. And so that story of Josh and Emilio and the family carried through all 3 movies. It was the one story that carried through. And that was a big lesson for me in terms of creating a genre of family films that were different than kids' films. Because people will still say to me, oh yeah, you make all these great kids' films. And I say, thank you, but they're not kids' films. Okay, have you ever seen this one or that one? No. I'm going to ask you to see it and call me, okay? Pick it up on Disney Plus or on this or that. Yeah. And I'll tell you one other thing in that, and that validated me in this. When I was at not the end of my tour, close to the end of my years at Disney, we had 11 years of a deal there, 16 movies. A guy named Michael Linton, who was the chairman of Sony when I was doing Smurfs, but who's now chairman of Snap, and who had been, when I knew him first, he was the chairman of Pearson Publishing, and then became the president of Hollywood Pictures at Disney. And I knew him mostly, a little bit from Pearson, but mostly from Hollywood Pictures. And I was getting ready to leave Disney to go to Paramount because I'd known Sherry Lansing since I was a college student. Her sister was a good friend of mine.
Oh, wow.
And so Sherry's been like a big sister to me my whole life, and my whole adult life, and adore the ground she walks on. But Michael Linton said to me as I was getting ready to leave Disney, Michael sat me down and said, here's how our family, because he has 3 daughters, like we have 3 daughters. And he said, and he lived in New York. And he said, on Saturdays, when we're going to go see a movie with our kids, if it's a Disney movie, any of your movies, or any of the animated movies, or a Pixar movie, we all go out to brunch, and then we go see like a 1:00 show, because it's usually not quite as busy as the first shows or the later in the afternoon shows. So we go to those, and if it's a Disney film, we all go. Okay, we go and we sit because we're all going to be entertained. And this is him saying to me, don't leave Disney, right? Stay with us. Don't go to Paramount and Nickelodeon. And then he said, but if it's a film like a Nickelodeon film, he says to me, we all sit down, we have brunch, we have a great time, and then all the parents draw straws as to who is going to take their book with them and sit in the lobby with all the kids while the kids are in the theater, right? Because they're not 4-quad, they're kids' films.
Yeah.
right? And they're boring to us, in that. And I thought that was, Michael's a wise person. And I just thought that was such a wise piece of information because it validated what I felt. It validated that we had to honor the entire audience. And if it was something that was based on a cartoon like George of the Jungle, Mighty Ducks based on an original script, Three Musketeers based on a classic novel, it had to be written for adults, but appropriate for children. Not heavy, not any real violence, and it could be sexual innuendo, but no sex. You just do those two things, then all the complex nature of human relationships can be told. So long as you have enough humor and you have enough movement, narrative momentum, and action, in these things. So we would always use that formula in all of these movies over the years to do it and tell different stories with each of them, what was appropriate for them. Yeah. So do you know, by the way, as well, that I was the dean of the film school at the University of North Carolina?
I was also going to ask that. Are you still the dean or?
No.
Oh.
No. I haven't been dean for, gosh, there have been 2 deans since me. I left in 2012.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, 12 years ago.
Okay.
But it was one of the great life experiences.
Fantastic. What did you find was the best part of that opportunity for you? What did you enjoy most?
I started that position as dean. I had worked years before with Erskine Bowles. He was running for the United States Senate. Norman Lear and I, twice for Erskine, gave him large fundraisers here. And then sadly, Erskine lost in both because he's such a smart person and a great guy. But we stayed in touch, and also he was the chief of staff for Clinton, and a very close friend of mine, John Emerson, was the assistant chief of staff. And John and I talk or see each other all the time here. He was most recently the ambassador to Germany for Obama. And then John Mauceri, who was the founding conductor of the Hollywood Bowl Symphony, became the chancellor of UNC's School of the Arts. And they had the opening for a dean, and I'd known John over the years. My parents were donors, and I'd go to the bowl with my kids and my wife all the time. And so he knew that was something I was interested in. And they contacted me and said, we have an opening, would you be interested? And I said, well, let's talk. And we talked. And I said to my wife, okay, this is going to be like we're doing a television series in North Carolina. I've signed up for 3 years.
Yeah.
Or I would sign up for 3 years if you agree. Because I didn't want to have them living here and I was living there. That I wouldn't have done it if that was going to be the case. But it was a moment in time in the girls' lives. They were in grammar school. And one of them was about to enter middle school, where it was okay. And taking them out of LA and taking them to Winston-Salem, North Carolina, which is a much smaller community, was a really interesting experience for them. So we were there 5 years, all told. And I got to help Beverly Perdue, who won for the governor, got to help Obama in 2008, who won presidency in North Carolina, and got to work with Kay Hagan, who was running for the U.S. Senate. And I did all the political work because I knew that given this was 2007, the Great Recession was gathering steam.
Yes.
And part of your job as dean is raising money for a school. So I knew that I'd probably have to go to the public sector to get some of the funds that we really needed. And therefore, I was going to need to know all the people, know them well, do things for them where they would want to help the school in the end. And we went from, actually that little plaque over there is about it, Hollywood Reporter. We went from a non-ranked school, but was given like an honorable mention for a good regional school.
Right.
Two, after 3 years, we were ranked the number 2 public school in the country of filmmaking, and the number 8 overall in the U.S. and number 12 in the world. We made a lot of changes, and the school just shot up all the rankings. So it was a really exciting time, even though it was a dark time because of the economy and everything else going on.
That's fantastic to hear. And not a lot of people know that while there is obviously a ton of production in both California and New York, North Carolina has a large chunk of production there as well, particularly indies.
Yes, indies and television series, because they have the old De Laurentiis stages that are there. There's like 11 stages there, I think. But it was interesting. Production had subsided a lot when I got there in 2007. That year, they had $49 million worth of film revenue, mostly commercials. And one, I think it was, there were the two series that were there that were sort of YA series. I'm trying to think of the name. It was with Josh Jackson. Dawson's Creek.
Yes, Dawson's Creek.
It was Dawson's Creek. And that was the only real project there. And that's when I entered. By the third year I was there, that coming year, we were 2010, 2011. I took the governor with me to Los Angeles, and we had lunch with every chairman of every studio, people I'd worked with over all the years. And we had a meeting with the president of physical production, because they were the ones who would choose what location and what incentive and all of that to take. So she learned so much during that time and empowered me and the film commissioner of North Carolina. And we hired Ernst & Young in New York to come in and do an analysis for the legislature and for the governor.
And Ernst & Young, for those who don't know, is a consulting firm.
A big consulting firm in New York. Because some of the incentives were lost leaders. The state lost money. We didn't want it to lose money, but we also didn't care whether it made a huge amount of money. What we cared about were jobs, that we could bring the work there and we could get people hired. And my desire for that, aside from what I've said already about currying favor and trying to get some funds for the school, was the fact that we added over that year and the next year 18,000 new jobs, and we had 484 million plus of revenues, up from 49 million 2.5-3 years before. And we put a new incentive in. The incentive they had was an 8% incentive or something. We put a 25% incentive in, and had all sorts of elements in that deal that the physical production presidents were looking for. And sometimes New Mexico would have one of them and Georgia would have another one of them. So we tried to package as many as Ernst & Young would, in their formula, would let us put in, that made the studios feel compelled to come. And we ended up having Gary Ross came, and
Director of Pleasantville?
The director of Pleasantville. He's an old friend, but he came with Hunger Games, the first movie, and shot there. We had Iron Man 3 that year. Because again, we were able to walk in and say, we've just passed this new legislation. We did it with all the things that you guys wanted, but it still makes sense for the state. The state will earn some income with that, but it really will create jobs. And we have a great crew base at that point. And then that was, as I said, 2010, 2011. 2010, the legislature went from a Democratic legislature with a Democratic governor to the Tea Party, and who thought, why are we giving incentives to these wealthy California and New York companies, to come in here? Well, my answer to them when I testified was, you've added 18,000 jobs, you have a lot of new taxpayers, a lot of new tax revenue, and you're doing this cash positive to the state. So you're just building your revenue base, in that. Well, they didn't like the idea politically. So I said to my wife, we're going to be here probably another year or two, but then if this is not going to happen, I can't get my students the kind of jobs I want to be able to get them. and we should probably head back to LA, which is what we did. And I was producing the Spurs movies at that point. So
Yes. That's wow. You mentioned earlier your list. What is on your list now?
it's a really good question. We have a bunch of projects right now. We have the sequel to Clifford. We are in that moment in time, and the studio loves the project. The problem that happened with Clifford on the first, and it still made like $120 million, cost 60 something. It came out on November the 10th, 2021, and that was the high point of the Delta variant. So more people were dead. Hospitals were full. You couldn't get in the hospitals. And there were more infections than any time during the pandemic. 2 weeks before, 2 weeks later, it was the high point that weekend.
Oh boy.
So that's what, we all thought it was, even people weren't going to the theaters, we thought that it had the potential to do 250 or 300. If there was no COVID, maybe if we were lucky, 300, 400, 450, somewhere in that range, because it has a big worldwide audience, like Smurfs did. Smurfs made nearly 600 in the first film. So came out, it opened okay, it stayed, but it still did about 120 in that. And so the studio, if it had done 300, 400, we would have had, and by the way, Paramount, different than Disney, whenever we had a Disney movie where the studio was happy, they knew that I would plan things as trilogies. So I always knew what the second and the third films were, and I'd already told them what they were, like pitching a series, because I was from series. And Paramount, I asked them after like a month of shooting, we were ahead of schedule. They loved everything they saw. They loved the early visual effects. I said, order the sequence script now. Order it now. Because if you do that, we'll be able to get a film out in 2 years. Okay, and for our audience, 2 years is an important milestone, 2.5. Once you hit 3 or 4, it gets harder. Okay, and by the way, what we learned from George of the Jungle, that was the first film where I actually thought, I wonder what the percentage is of kids going to the theaters to see it versus adults. Well, it ended up in George of the Jungle, and I'll come back to the story. George of the Jungle was 1/3 kids, 1/3 parents, and 1/3 single women or gay men. Because Brendan's in a loincloth, and right? He's so handsome, right? But there's a line in the movie that's shooting between George's legs, looking at muscly man and her best friend. And Leslie is like, wow, because George is naked coming out of the shower and dripping water and other things. And her girlfriend says to her, Kelly's her name, says to her, now I see why they call him King of the Jungle. Right? So the adults in the audience are all laughing. And kids are like, yeah, he's really strong, he's fun, he's cool. Because they don't, they're not gonna, it's gonna go right over their heads. With that. 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Came after George, Inspector Gadget. 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 nostalgic adults who are parents. Okay, same thing was true, I'm just trying to think chronologically. Same thing was true with Snow Dogs. Actually, not Snow Dogs. Snow Dogs was different. It really had the two major, the kids and the parents. Clifford was definitely that. Smurfs was definitely nostalgic adults who had grown up with the Smurfs or who had grown up with Clifford. And so it was 1/3 those. So our movies are 2/3 adults and 1/3 kids. We're not mostly kids, in those things. So that was the big lesson ultimately.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
The piece with Luis Mandoki, we have a script right now.
Yeah.
We're going to go out. We've gone out to 2 places. We actually sold it at one place, but the budget was too low, so we backed away. It's a Holocaust film about a subject that nobody's seen, and I can't believe hasn't been made yet. It's a story that takes place in Czechoslovakia, in the old Czechoslovakia, called Terezín, and it's a camp. It was a camp that was built by the French for the Habsburgs, the dynasty who had all that area of the Balkans and Austria and everything, the Czech Republic, all of that. So it was if you were in a drone looking down at it, it's an 8-point star. And when you go into it, the facilities that held the wives and the children of the guards who lived there, it was beautiful. And it looked like an Eastern European college campus. It was surrounded by a moat. It was just beautiful. And that camp was different than every other camp because all the other camps had one set of designs: work camp, death camp. And they were all usually 1 story high. A couple of buildings would be 2 or 3. And they were, beds would be 4 beds to the ceiling, all those things. People would be just squished in there. And that camp, Auschwitz, couldn't kill people fast enough in terms of the amount of Jews that were being sent to Auschwitz and the Romas and other people that Hitler wanted to kill. So they started to build Birkenau. But then they took the camp of Terezin and they used it as like a holding tank so that they would hold all the Jews being sent in until they could accept some more in Auschwitz. Then it's a 6-hour train ride. They'd shoot them right to Auschwitz to be murdered. So that was that camp.
Yeah.
But then, and I don't want to give away the story, but 1 or 2 more little thoughts. Adolf Eichmann finally came and saw it and said, okay, I want to get rid of everyone over the age of 50, send them all, right now. Yeah. And then I want every artist who's Jewish in another camp, or all the other camps, I want all the artists shipped here. Dancers, singers, filmmakers, actors, musicians, all of that.
Right.
And he came up with this idea that we're going to invite the Red Cross to see this camp because they would never allow the press in. Nobody ever saw a camp, the interior of a camp.
Right.
They brought them into this camp that looked nothing like the other camps and didn't have at that point ovens. So they weren't killing people, they were simply shipping them in that. And he said, we're going to invite the Red Cross and let them take photographs on a prescribed route. We're going to repaint, we're going to remodel the entire camp over the next 4 months. Right. And at the 5th month, they're going to come. We're going to do a children's play. We're going to do Mozart's Requiem.
Right.
And we're going to do, we're going to have paintings showing how happy the life is here. Okay. And I can show it later. I'll show you something from this book. Sure. And brilliant notion. So he got the guy, actually looks a little like Alfred Molina. And he was a director and an actor. He was in A Blue Angel with Marlene Dietrich. Okay. He was the 3rd lead. He was a comic actor, but he was a director. Yeah. And so Eichmann got him. He was full of himself. Even if he was a concentration camp and could be killed anyone, full of himself. And Eichmann said, I want you to do a movie about how happy everybody is here. I want you to write the script. I want you to direct the film. I want you to take a husband from here and a wife from there and a kid over here and put them together as a family. Yeah. Okay. And teach them what they have to say and do along the route that they're going to go in case the Red Cross wants to stop and say something to them and ask them a question. So he taught them to do all of that and he shot the film. Okay. They brought the Red Cross in. They did the whole thing. The Red Cross believed it. The Red Cross went back. And one of the things they gave to them was a package of paintings. Actually, yes, it was a package of paintings, but it was really the libretto from the children's play, and it was all in Czech. And the Germans didn't speak Czech. Okay, and the Schweizerdeutsch didn't speak Czech either. So at some point, one of the Red Cross people says, let's get it translated. Yeah. And when they translated it, they realized that what the Czechs were saying to them was, help us, we're being killed. Got to stop this, get people here to save us, right? And the King of Denmark was involved with that and convinced the Soviets to move from where their liberation of camps to get into Terezin right away. In the end, they killed almost everyone. And most of the people who were in the film and most of the people who had created this false narrative. And it became the first and loudest initiation of Holocaust denial. It was alternative facts. It was media manipulation. It was all the things that we have looked at a certain political administration in the United States. That's why it's so timely. And the authoritarianism of it, of the idea of what Eichmann did, it was so genius, in that way. So that's one of the movies that's on that. So it's Clifford, it's that. We have what will be, we hope, a limited series based on a series of books called Dinotopia that we're developing.
I grew up with Dinotopia. I love that.
You saw the books? You saw the miniseries in the
books mainly
in the 90s.
Yeah. Oh my God.
So we're working on that with Carrie Kirkpatrick. You know Carrie?
I don't know Carrie, no.
Carrie wrote Chicken Little, not Chicken Little, Chicken Run, and he wrote the sequel recently. He wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. He wrote James and the Giant Peach. He wrote and directed Over the Hedge. He's done so many things. He worked with me on Charlotte's Web.
Yeah.
He worked with me on Smurfs, and now he's working with me with Claire Senna, who's another wonderful writer I'd worked with before. Together, they're working on Dinotopia, and it's set in the present. It's as if Blue Origin had gone up and the parachute didn't open and it crashes and it goes into a cloud bank and nobody sees it, and lands in Dinotopia.
Oh, wow.
Right, so we go right to the present with that.
I'm really excited.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. And I'll tell you one other thing, which is it was their idea. We tried to figure out, it was in Dinotopia, but it not as specific as this, that we call it the Great Agreement. It's sort of like the Magna Carta, that 1 million years ago, this island, I won't tell you how, was protected from the meteor that came in and killed all life, or most life, certainly all the dinosaurs. They were protected. It's a little archipelago that has cloud cover over it. And the cloud cover always stays there. And it has something to do with aliens and other things that we'll find out way down the line. But like the Magna Carta, the plant-eating dinosaurs were being eaten by the flesh-eating dinosaurs, the herbivores and the carnivores. And they had to come, they finally had a huge meeting and said, look, go ahead, you're gonna eat all of us. What are you gonna eat when we're gone? You're gonna eat yourselves, okay? You have no choice. There's nothing else here. And this was before humans came. And then they made this pact that they would learn to be herbivores, okay? And if other animals were around, that they were fair game, but they wouldn't eat the other dinosaurs. And then when humans came, the herbivores said, these are intelligent creatures, so we have to leave them alone also. But, if you see a fox over there, have a nice lunch, basically, is that. So we wanted to create something that was very real in that, but is being sorely tested. And there's always that little bit of, in the DNA, things still exist. So, because it's a utopia, right? And if we live with a utopia as a movie or a series, the problem with utopias is there's no dramatic conflict.
Yeah.
So, and we work with James, on it. And there will be some conflict, which is in its own a rebellion from the norm. Because the norm is a utopia, but there's conflict at the edges of it. And that's what we explore in this. So there's that. And lastly, we have a comedy at the CW that is based on Pooch Cafe, which is a strip in about 360 newspapers around the world, and a Canadian strip, and it's really funny. If you think of Cheers with dogs, okay, that they get to say and do everything that we would want to hear, and they get to play with all, human foibles. but they're actually talking dogs. And we meet their humans, and some of the dogs think that cats are aliens. So they are working very hard to develop an extremely large catapult that they could put all the cats into and send them into the sun. The dogs think this.
Yes,
And-
and it's appropriate that you chose a catapult. Yes.
It catapults, yes. And yeah, and it is mentioned in that way. And also, the squirrels have they're like the mafia, right? They control the trees, okay, because they're up in the trees and all of that. And they won't let the dogs pee on the trees unless they pay, right? So there's always a negotiation to pay on the tree. And so they're kind of a mafia villain. The biggest villain of them all and there's a new one who's going to be introduced into the series after the first episode, is the mailman. I mean, the mailman has this bag. Clearly it's valuables, and we don't like him. He comes and already doesn't like us,
Yeah.
so there's all that humor is being played. It's a half-hour adult animation comedy for the CW. So those are the things that are coming at the moment. And there's a whole bunch of other things in development. So
Oh, cool. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking.
great pleasure.
And that is Season 3, Episode 1 of the Producers Lounge podcast. Thank you to my guest, Jordan Kerner, for joining us. You can find out more about him by checking out the show notes and subscribing to our YouTube channel. Our intro and outro music today was Faster Does It by Kevin MacLeod. Our episode still image is the Smurfs movie poster from Paramount Animation. We'd love to hear from you, and you can check out this week's accompanying article on greaterandgrander.com entitled The Timeless Power of Values in Creative Projects. Link in the show notes. You can stay up to date by following us on YouTube at the handle Greater Grander, all one word. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube, other social media networks, and wherever fine podcasts are found. And also, if you like what we do, share this podcast with a friend who you think will enjoy it. Join us next week for more cocktails and questions, and until then, keep producing dreams.